Criminal justice reform: 25 steps to a more just system. The issues relating to race and criminal justice are huge and complicated. There are deeply embedded systemic issues with policing, investigations, the trial process, and incarceration. Each of these areas will be addressed separately. While these issues can affect people of all races, they fall disproportionately on Black people in both frequency and magnitude. Race is not mentioned specifically in what follows because if these measures are enacted in a way that is fair, racially balanced, and equitable, those communities that have been carrying the burden of injustice will reap the greatest benefits. This is also just the beginning of the discussion. It is not an all-inclusive assessment, as I will note at the end. Additionally, as reforms occur, it may reveal other issues. This is just to take the energy and the interest of today and focus it on specific issues that need to be addressed. Reforms to policing. 1. A national policing standard when it comes to hiring, training, use of force, among other things. There needs to be centralized licensing and certification for all officers along with continuing education requirements. It will include a database to indicate which officers are in good standing and which ones are not. Each department would be required to report specific information which would be used to give them a grade. If they willfully give bad or incomplete information, they would be charged with a felony. 2. There needs to be community oversight, and members cannot be part of or retired from law enforcement or the criminal justice system in any way. Immediate family members would also be excluded. 3. Demilitarization. All heavy military equipment should be turned back in. If there is a true need, they should get congressional approval. When all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. 4. An outside agency needs to be created to address concerns officers may have about their fellow officers and/or their leadership. The reporting would have to be confidential and outside other normal reporting. 5. Officers should be recorded at all times. The recording default should be to on, and the officer can turn it off only for short periods of time before it automatically turns back on. If it is off for too long, leadership should be contacted. All recordings should be kept for at least 90 days. 6. Along with continuing education, the mental health of officers should be evaluated regularly. Trauma and stress can have a huge impact on people over time. 7. Limit hours for outside gigs. Officers use their credentials as police to pick up outside gigs. There needs to be a cap on the total hours they can work to avoid burnout and fatigue. Reforms to investigations. 8. Medical examiners' offices and evidence testing facilities should never be under the umbrella of law enforcement or the prosecutor's office. They need to be overseen and report to a neutral third party. 9. Jailhouse snitches should be banned completely. Any jurisdiction still using them should probably be investigated from top to bottom because the problems with using these people as sources are well known, and it is likely that the people within the system are taking shortcuts to get convictions. 10. Officers and their leadership cannot view the video of any incident prior to or immediately after writing the official report. The report would need to be turned over to all interested parties first. If other witnesses do not have that benefit, their statements may seem less accurate or consistent with the video evidence, so they may seem less credible in the eyes of juries and others. Enabling an officer to write a report to the video is not serving anyone. 11. New science needs to be thoroughly tested and proven, possibly through the National Board of Standards. Fake science has gotten into too many courtrooms and ruined too many lives. 12. When there is a possible incident with an officer, the department that they are in should be immediately removed from the investigation. 13. Issues relating to investigations would be included in the National Board of Standards. This includes things like the recording of interrogations and identification using eyewitnesses. Reforms to trials. 14. Bail reform is a huge issue in some areas of the country. A simple arrest with nothing else can essentially result in a fine because people have to post bail and they may need to use a bail bondsman who charges them a percentage of the bond even if charges are dropped. Imagine getting arrested, being innocent, and still having it cost you several $1,000s to get out of jail, and that is before your attorney's fees. Bail is handled differently in different parts of the country. 15. Records of an officer's misconduct reports should be available to all defendants. 16. The entire plea bargain process needs to be reviewed and restructured. There can be an incentive for people to plead to a crime they did not commit to get out of jail more quickly and without the added costs of bondsmen and attorneys, which has nothing to do with crime and justice. People have remained in jail awaiting trial longer than they may have served if they were found guilty. This is closer to extortion than justice. 17. Officers involved in possible misconduct need to have their cases evaluated and handled by a prosecutor and prosecutor's office who has not worked with him. There is an inherent conflict of interest when the same prosecutor that may need that officer to testify has to investigate possible criminal behavior. Add to that, if the officer has testified in a similar case, some prosecutors may be reluctant to push forward with charges because it could jeopardize the state of convictions they have already secured. Reforms to incarceration. 18. People should serve their time as close to their family as possible. 19. Every person should be allowed a specific amount of time to contact family each week. If the person is far from friends and family, they should be allotted much more time, and this should all be for free. Maintaining contacts is important when they get out. This is something that varies by state and location. 20. Companies that utilize prison labor must hire a certain percentage of those people when they get out, and they need to be part of their workforce outside of prison. 21. The entire prison labor system needs to be evaluated along with educational programs. These are great for inmates and should not be stopped. That said, if these resources were available more widely on the outside, there may be fewer inmates. Reforms overall. 22. No funding for police departments should come from fines or seized goods. It creates perverse incentives. 23. Any officer, prosecutor, judge, or anyone in the criminal justice system involved in blatant misconduct should have their charges enhanced because they have done far greater damage to the public trust than a regular person. 24. When there is gross misconduct, every case that person was involved in should be given automatic appeals. The clock rewinds to innocent until proven guilty and not was there still enough evidence to convict if some of that evidence had not been presented. If a criminal defense attorney is found unfit and loses his license, his clients should also have an automatic opportunity to appeal. 25. This is perhaps the most significant and likely cheapest. Police departments need to stop asking was it justified and instead need to focus first on was it avoidable. Departments who do this consistently will find it easier to stay in the good graces of the community they serve. Also important but not covered, a review of how we penalize misconduct. Is prison/jail the best or only way? And why do we put so many people in prison longer than almost any other country in the world? We need to reduce the barriers to re-entry after incarceration. The list is endless, from housing to employment to things that you cannot imagine. Address the challenges in reunifying families and children. The impact of incarceration on families and children cannot be understated. We need to stop the criminalization of trauma. We need to treat trauma instead of punishing the victims of it. There are so many things in this area. A complete breakdown is a different discussion, which also needs to happen. So, are you overwhelmed? This is what you can do immediately. Contact your local police department. Find out how many officers they have, what sort of qualifications are required, do they have or do regular community events, how many officers live in the community. Start a dialogue, get engaged, know what is happening. Reach out to organizations advocating for reform or helping people caught in the system in one way or another. Organizations are all over the place because the problems are all over the place. If you want to focus on one area, that is okay. Just do something and advocate for change. I should also add that there is a ton of money being made off the system, so it's going to take massive action by many people to get changes made. Bail bonds alone is a huge business, and that's only one example. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. If you don't take that first step, you will never travel a mile. Just take one step at a time, the miles will add up. Thank you. This is Lisa Snow at snowinlosangeles@gmail.com.